What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today, we'll be joined by Doug Nori from Locked On Nets to discuss the Brooklyn Nets on a 6-game winning streak, having won 10 of their last 11 games in a row. Is it real, though, or is it fool's gold based on the quality of opponents? We're going to break down that. We'll discuss how much credit Jacques Vaughn, head coach of the Nets, should get for kind of rallying the troops, settling the ship a little bit after such a tumultuous start to the Brooklyn Nets season. Plus, Ben Simmons, how has he looked? How is he fitting in with the rest of the guys, and what version of Ben Simmons does this Nets team need to have to be considered legitimate contenders moving forward? But first, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Next game, I'm taking Devin Booker to score more than 26.5 points. How about Kevin Durant to have less than 6.5 rebounds? And what about Paolo Banchero to go more than 4.5 assists? So what is Prize Picks, right? How does Prize Picks work? Basically, you pick 2 to 6 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times back on your money on any entry that you submit. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. That includes NBA, NFL, NHL, PGA, you name it. They've got you covered over at Prize Picks. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that simple. They offer safe and fast withdrawals. Currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. And joining us now is the host of Locked On Nets, Doug Nori. You can follow on Twitter at Doug Nori. Now, the Nets looking like they've turned a bit of a corner here, Doug. I mean, they're riding a 6-game win streak. They've won 10 out of their last 11 games. Their most recent win, I will admit, it took 81 combined points from Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving against the Detroit Pistons, but they got that win. They're 6th in a row. How, over this recent stretch, Doug, I mean, I want to say, you know, the Nets maybe have turned a corner here, but then you look at maybe the quality of the opponents over this recent stretch. So is this maybe some fool's gold here, or have the Nets really kind of locked in and figured themselves out, do you think?
Yeah, this is like the devil with the Nets season and trying to understand exactly where they are and trying to make any like grand determinations about what the team is like sort of where you just were now. Is like, I mean, when do you factor in quality opponent? When do you factor in quality of win? I mean, at the end of the year, when we're sitting here at the end of the season, I don't think we're going to look back at these W's and nitpick each one. Like the wins are just going to be the wins, and that's what's going to be the record. And at the same time, I totally get what you're saying is that, like, how much is there to take away from a win over the Pistons where you had to, scratch and claw to get all the way there? You know, a Raptors team that isn't fully healthy. Basically, the story of the season is every team they played really hasn't been at full strength. And so they've won the games. Their point differential is still pretty low. Like the Knicks have a better point differential than the Nets, right? And no one's putting those two teams in the same class, but it does speak to sort of like how they're winning games. I've tried to make a resolution coming up for the new year around myself to say that, hey, wins are wins, and like, let's try to celebrate the wins where they are. But on a higher level, I get what you're saying. And I think that is sort of a more macro theme, which makes the team very hard to evaluate right now. I think like what they are, because if you're going to put them in the championship evaluation, then maybe these wins aren't good enough. If you're just going to be of the, hey, 10 out of the last 11 games are wins, and this is like fun to watch, and KD going nuclear in the third quarter against the Pistons is something cool to see, then we're all in, right? But if you're running two parallel tracks about how you view the team on a game-to-game basis and as a higher level team, I think you're probably of two minds about the team right now.
It could also be one of those things, right, where, just at the end of the day, you got to play who's in front of you, right? You got to scratch out, scrape out a win no matter what. And it could be one of those things that maybe helps kind of galvanize the team moving forward, because you like being able to talk about 10 out of the last games being wins, even if, maybe quality of opponent isn't quite there. But how much, Doug, when you're looking at kind of how this season has gone for the Nets with such a kind of a tumultuous start early on, how much credit should, Jacques Vaughn be kind of getting as far as just kind of settling the ship for this group of guys?
I mean, a ton of credit. The fact that the Nets are here now with a long Kyrie suspension, with a Simmons still not up to full minutes injury thing, with multiple guys. Like they've run, I think, the most 5-man rotations in the whole league. And if it's not the most, it's really close. Like it's them and the Lakers or something like that. No good team has run this many 5-man combinations this season. And it really speaks to just how much sort of weirdness has been around the Nets season. The fact that they are here with just rotational pieces in and out of the mix and just not having what's presumed to be their best players for longer stretches. You have to give Vaughn a ton of credit here. And I think too, what we're seeing from him in this Detroit game was emblematic of it too, is that they're still trying to figure out what works. Like they have not gotten all these guys into the mix fully, right? TJ Warren is just coming back from 2 years basically out of the league, right? Yuta Watanabe, who's been a complete and utter find for this team, has had injury stuff of his own. Seth Curry's working back from injury. Joe Harris working back from injury. They have a lot of really good rotation players, and they're trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And I think that this is not an easy thing to do in the current NBA either. And so I think back to your original question, like, does Vaughn deserve a ton of credit? Of course. I mean, he's been so good. And especially too, if you listen to, because you've listened to pre and post game stuff, specifically pre-game stuff. Look, you cover the NBA for a long time. A lot of these guys can just be, it's boilerplate, it's boring, it doesn't tell you anything. It's just something to check off the box and move on. Vaughn's, even his answers to questions are incredibly detailed, incredibly thoughtful, and he just has a completely different style that is really, it's just really positive and just it's actually fun to cover. So I give him a ton of credit. I think he's worked with a really difficult situation. What they're doing now is really positive, and I think he's a big part of why it's kind of coming together.
You mentioned Ben Simmons' name there a moment ago, Doug. I mean, look, at this point, it feels like, we kind of know, right, what KD can be, what he is when he's playing at his max level. Same thing can be said for Kyrie Irving, but Ben Simmons, just how is he kind of factoring into all of this as a whole, and what does he need to do to get to a place where you feel like incredibly confident about this team moving forward?
Yeah, this is probably the question that hinges their sort of championship trajectory on, is that, like, I think we know what KD brings in a 7-game series for the playoffs. I think we can envision what Kyrie does really well, maybe things he doesn't do as well, but it's still good enough to be on the court, right? Of course, and just be one of the best players. The Simmons piece is, I think, still just a question mark. I think there's times where you definitely see it, specifically defensively and as a connector in the offense. I think it's there. He's still not ramped up to full minutes. Like, he only played 25 in this game against the Pistons. He still doesn't want to shoot. I don't think that's ever going to change. And so when those things are still problems and you sort of wonder about how the Claxton Simmons piece works, I don't think I have a great answer for it. I don't think we've seen enough to be so encouraged by it at the highest level, right? Like on a regular season basis, it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. At the highest level, I still don't think we've seen enough to really know. The Nets are in a really interesting potential problem here, is that clearly Nick Claxton and clearly Ben Simmons are two of the 5 best players on the team, and they don't really pair that well on offense. And so you end up, in some ways, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because you can't really play them together tons, and you can't not play them either. And so I think a lot of the season will probably at its highest level come down to what happens with him. I still don't think I want to make a final determination, except I'm not discouraged by it, right? Like it's not discouraging. He does a few things really, really at an elite level. To the point of attack defense, switching, his ability to kind of like jump routes and stuff like that is really, really good. He's still a good connector in the offense. He has tried to be a little more aggressive on offense, but I think you still probably need to see more to start dreaming about the Nets reaching the mountaintop.
Is there a world where we see the Nets kind of make that shift and move one of those two guys to a bench role to kind of unlock a little bit more with that starting lineup?
Yeah, I guess this is the problem, right? It's like, well, what do you do? Because you can't, who do you not play? You have to play one of these two guys. And to some degree, or excuse me, you have to play both. And you know this too. The NBA in a lot of ways is a numbers game. When you have guys like Simmons making a certain amount of money, they just have to be one of your best players. Like, there's just, the math doesn't work out otherwise. You can't find enough talent for nothing to make up for money already spent on a guy. I think we've seen a version of Simmons that could be worth the money he makes. even if he was worth 75% of the money he makes or something like that, I think it works. But the problem is if he becomes a bench player and is playing 24 minutes a game, let's say, in the end, the math isn't going to work about getting all the way to a championship or winning multiple series in the playoffs, because you just can't find enough along the margins. Claxton's a little bit different because he doesn't make as much money, but at the same time, he's shown himself to be one of like the best values, per dollar guys in the NBA right now. Like, he is among the league leader in blocks. He's an incredible switch defender. Like, he actually can get to the rack if he gets put into just sort of break glass in case of emergency situations. I don't want to sit either of them, and I also just fail to see sometimes how the pairing works. And I think this is probably going to be the story, as they go forward, of like what really, really happens with this team.
Can the Brooklyn Nets navigate back to that true contender status? I mean, is this, as a series of wins, is this, the painting the picture for the future of this team? What's going to happen with that pairing of Ben Simmons and Nick Claxton? Can they get that situation figured out? Of course, you're going to have us covered for all of that and more over at Locked On Nets. Doug, I appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
All right. Thanks so much.